And welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast. If you're listening live, you're joining us on February the 16th. We're the podcast that discusses local, national, and international matters in a calm, reasoned, and balanced way with almost no biting, gouging, or swearing. I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sainsbury. I feel like I'm obliged to provide the biting, gouging, or swearing. So, February the 14th, a romantic day, Valentine's Day, happened this week. I hope everybody had a fantastic Valentine's Day and enjoyed themselves. February the 11th, however, while not being Valentine's Day, was an expression of sincerely heartfelt emotions other than love. Probably a bit strong to call them hate, but we'll let you, the viewer, decide. It was the cabinet meeting for Portsmouth City Council, the precursor to the full council budget meeting that takes place on the 25th. So we're going to talk about the cabinet meeting because it gives us some spoilers.
Yeah, no, today it's a chance for us to pick up on the insights in terms of, setting a balanced budget. What will be the proposal for the rise in council tax? I think a betting person might already have their shilling on 4.99%, but we'll come to that in due course. And I guess there's an added dimension this time round, Simon, we're still not sure whether this is the last ever Portsmouth CC unitary budget or whether they'll get another go next year before local government reorganisation and devolution swallows them up and spits them out as a different animal.
Yeah, indeed. And that's kind of the key thing, and something actually that Council Leader Steve Pitt speaks of rather passionately towards the end of the meeting. So just so that anybody knows, and if they wanted to actually look at more of the details of the meeting, it is available on the council's website. I'll pop the details into the comments, and the live stream of the meeting is on the Portsmouth City Council's Democratic Services Team's YouTube channel. So by all means, do go give that a look if you want to actually look through the whole thing. It's only about an hour's meeting, so as council meetings go, it's quite short. But yeah, what was on the agenda? Well, quite a few things. Shall I run quickly through some of the also-rans, and then we'll get into the detail?
Yeah, we'll look at the kind of something and nothings before we get into the meat of the whole affair.
Okay, so some things that were on there. We talked about buses. There was a proposal about accepting more money from government about buses and about the successes of the bus improvement plans that have been taking place in Portsmouth. And I'll let the cabinet member for traffic and transportation, Peter Candlish, we've got some clips of his speeches there, so he can speak to that. There's a bit about the local development plan, which all that does is basically outlines the timeline for preparing the city's planning documents and making sure that the Portsmouth local plan is actually submitted by March 2025, and the Treasury mid-year review. So how are we doing against where we thought we were, and then the all-important council tax recommendations for the next period. So yes, those are the kind of the key things. I mean, the Treasury management indicators, just to quickly run those off in a sentence, they are showing that Portsmouth City Council is running within Treasury management policy for 24-25 as of the 30th of September. No borrowing has been undertaken in the first half of 24-25, and none is expected for the remaining year. And there are no changes to the council's risk appetite. And the risk appetite sounds probably a lot more interesting than it is, but we don't want to spoil all of the stuff that's going to be in the budget.
No. Well, to be honest, the mid-year Treasury review has the feeling of one of those shows that might have happened in the mid to late 80s in the Gaiety show bar on South Parade Pier. It's like a kind of variety show with a crooner. But I'm guessing the mid-year Treasury review probably wasn't quite so glamorous. But but still,
no, not quite so glamorous. And this is of course a cabinet meeting, so it doesn't have everybody in the council in it. So it has the members of the of the administration present. Also present were some officers and Councillor George Madgwick, the leader of the Portsmouth Independence Group. He was also there. So basically, it wasn't quite the normal pantomime that you perhaps see with full council, but still there's some good stuff to talk about with regards to things. So should we without wishing to sound, should we get on the bus?
Yes. Yeah, getting on board, that's the thing.
Yes, let's get on the buses. This is what Councillor Peter Candlish had to say about the buses.
I think up to 10% of the additional volume that we attracted through the free weekend bus travel has led on to people using the buses all the time. We're now moving on to, if you like, the harder side of the bus programme. That's improving basics like signage, bus stops, putting in real-time information boards with better quality, more accessible data, both at the stop and also on top of the buses. And this is based from a really fundamental, grounded, granular level of understanding about what people actually want. So the original BSIP programme spoke to 1,100 residents, 30 businesses, obviously the bus operators, the cabinet and other council members. A lot of people have put information into this, and that's why we're getting such a good result out. But it's been incredibly detailed as well.
Subscribe or follow for more.
Tap on, tap off, which takes away some of those barriers to people using buses because it becomes nice and easy to do. We've had free bus weekends, which has been really successful in getting new people to use the buses. And importantly, that has led to ongoing and sustained usage of the buses. Every bus stop in the city has had a 70-step audit done. And that has led on to all of the specifics, bus stop by bus stop improvement plans that are now gradually being laid out. I'm also delighted to say that the work has been recognised nationally. Distinguished council officers have been asked to go to the House of Commons and make a presentation showcasing the good work that Portsmouth has done. And overall, the Enhanced Partnership won gold at the National Bus Awards.
Follow or subscribe for more.
So really, really well done there for the officers at Portsmouth City Council. Gold at the Bus Awards. That's really good news for Portsmouth.
Yes, and interesting to look at that through a number of lenses. And I must confess a little bit of skin in the game on this one.
Okay.
The eagle-eyed followers of Portsmouth City Council's Twitter feed, you may have seen some stuff around, or even their Facebook page. You may have seen some photographs, which has two men standing in a bus stop, one with a guide dog. Well, one of them was me and the other was Peter Candlish. So with work, I'm doing some stuff around buses, and for the vision impaired community, we've got two workshops, one coming up on Wednesday, the 19th in Cosham, and one 2 weeks later on Tuesday in Portsmouth Central Library, to try and encourage folk from the vision impaired community to get on board. So yeah, this is one I've been following intently, and the whole bus service improvement plan, it is, there's a lot of investment going into it, and it's good to hear that it sounds like it's having some positive results.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, the item that was bought it talks about since between 22-25, there's been a £48.3 million worth of investment in buses in the city. 34 million of that was in capital expenditure, but 14.5 was about revenue interventions. The Portsmouth Enterprise Partnership imagines basically a city vision for Portsmouth for 2040 with zero emission bus. So a zero emission buses regional area grant, or ZEBRA. They like their acronyms, these people. It's we've got the PEP, and we've got the there was I could forget the other one,
VSIP.
but it was a zebra. So it's a zebra and it's crossing. So so an increase in number in bus journeys, aiming to basically increase those over what they were prior to the pandemic by making tickets affordable, reliable, and by facilitating faster routes. And this item was about accepting additional Department of Transport funding for 25-26 financial year,
Yeah.
which is 2.2 million capital and 2.4 revenue. So so lots of stuff there. Funnily enough, I'm not going to spoil anything by revealing that they said yes. They weren't going to say no, we don't want the money, were they really?
No, and it was interesting. Peter spoke about the real-time bus information, and that is being rolled out. I think original plan was end of February. I think it's now looking like end of March, but might roll on. And that would effectively mean that every bus stop would have a digital screen as well as a voice-activated button that would tell you in real time where the next bus is and when it's liable to arrive. Which is really helpful, because I think there have been similar things in the past, but they were based on what the timetable was rather than the real-time tracking of the bus. So, if your bus is at 5:02, being stood there at 10:02 and it's saying it's going to be there in 5 minutes, well, that's kind of what you might have hoped. But if it's running 15 minutes late, then that really is useful information if you then have time to go and grab yourself a coffee or something from a local shop to tide you over on your journey. So good developments, and I guess they'll be interesting to see, is it from April that the £2 goes up to £3, or is that already?
That was from January. That was
from January.
So, that's already happened.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see whether that makes a difference, because obviously, the key thing is getting people to go on the bus when it's free, or when it's very cheap and is subsidised is much easier than potentially somebody making it a lifestyle choice in terms of an alternative to their car. So let's keep fingers crossed that it continues to grow, and all sounds very positive.
Yeah, all good stuff there. So that one was good. Then the next thing on the agenda was the council tax recommendations. So let me get a little chart up just to, we won't kind of go through those in massive detail because they'll be kind of put out in print. But basically, so the highlights of the council tax, £110 million worth of savings since 2011, 2012, which is 50% of controllable spend. Adult social care now represents over 60%, around 60% of controllable spend. And the general increase in council tax is 4.99%, made up of 2.99% general spend and the 2% that is passported to adult social care. So, and I believe somewhere in the they talk about for every percent that you don't increase the council tax by, you have to find another £1 million worth of savings in expenditure in order to be able to afford it. But for example, a Band D property, that then puts the total council tax burden, including the fire and the police precepts, to £2,181 a year.
From about 190, I think, something like that. Might be more than that. But anyway, so I guess, I mean, this is not a shock to anybody who's followed the podcast. Last 3-4 years, it's gone up by 4.99%, and which is the maximum that you can put it up. 5%, you have to go to a referendum. Our pals across the border in Hampshire went to the government rattling a tin and said, is there any chance rather than 4.99 we can put it up by 14.99? And the government said no. So yeah, it is a kind of, everything goes up every year. And there are some interesting dynamics, aren't there, with the very significant rise in the minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
That is bound to put inflationary pressures on councils. The national insurance rise, that's going to work out as a sort of pretty much a minimum of £600 per employee, and the council employs an awful lot of people. So when you put that all together, you know, to only raise the council tax by 5%, or by the shouting, it kind of, I guess, most people are going to sort of shrug and say, well, are we getting to the stage where it is what it is? It's going to be 5% every year, forever and ever?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I think this comes to the fundamental thing about how actual local government settlement, how the financial settlement is calculated for local government. I think if you ask probably most people, they think that the council gets all of their money from council tax revenues, which they don't. It's I think it's just under 50% of actually income that they get. But actually, most of the rest of the money actually comes from basically from central government, and in other means, from like business rates, for example. So there's not as much control that councils have over what they don't have as much control over what they can spend things on as I think probably most people think. There's an awful lot of things that are mandatory, that are statutory requirements, that they have to fund from within all of that pot, as well as the things that are the discretionary things that they want to spend on. And this kind of speaks to the whole kind of argument about devolution and about local government reorganisation. How do you organise that if a borough council isn't responsible for things like, isn't responsible for things like roads or healthcare or refuse collection? Then it's the county council that's pretty much taking most of that burden. In Portsmouth, we don't have that two-tier situation. We're a unitary authority, like Southampton are, and like the Isle of Wight are. So we have a kind of slightly different thing, but the question is the money coming from central government enough to pay for all of the things that actually the central government is telling the local councils that they have to actually pay for?
Well, and I guess there's another angle to that, Simon, which is that, if we look at the mood music of at least the last 10 years, that the mood music has been not enough, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not enough money into the NHS. It's not enough money into education. It's, why have the police numbers been cut? We should have more police. There's not enough investment in the armed forces. We need to be spending 3%, 2% GDPR. Everything is always an expectation of more. And I think if you ask most people, the mood music is they feel like they're getting less. And I just wonder, against that backdrop, whether almost no matter how much money local government, national government was to give to local government, if I'm honest with you, Simon, I can't see a time when local government or any kind of local, they're not going to set that discretionary taxation at 4.99%. I can't see a time when they're going to go, oh, no, you're fine. We've got plenty now. We don't need an extra couple of percent from you. We'll just set it at 3%. You'll be fine.
But I think that's actually the root of some of the problems that some of the other authorities have actually had, that they haven't actually increased by the they've done everything that they've chosen not to increase council tax for whatever reason, and there'll be some political ideologies about whether that's a good or a bad thing, or a right or a wrong answer. But in some circumstances, that's precisely what's left them with a massive shortfall and a deficit in their income versus expenditure, and what's caused kind of the problems in some of those places. So I think like everything, there's a middle ground, isn't there? It's not a absolute position of never raise taxes or always raise taxes. Somewhere along the line, there needs to be some sort of sensible rethink about how these things are paid for and at what level of government they're paid for. But by and large, pushing decisions down to the down to the nearest form of government to where people live, to me is a good idea. Hopefully we can see that's probably something that is behind the theory of the devolution and the local government reorganisation. I mean, the kind of summary at the end of the council tax report, part of the briefing, was that the council's financial health is currently sound, but future risks remain relating to inflation, volatility, and accelerating demand for care services, as well as the uncertainty arising from the review of local government funding. So there they are. They've kind of said that in a sentence, and
I think all of that is very valid. I'm putting my 5p on the table now and saying that I think 4.99% is baked in forever, unless there is a change that means that you can increase it by more than 4.99%. And I think it's one of those things where, whilst people never like to see anything go up, when I used to commute by rail into work every day, I never quite understood the that there was in the first 2 weeks of January every year, where the rules are that the rail fares went up by whatever it was, 2% plus RPI, and that happened every year, which meant your rail ticket went up by about 5-6%, which meant your £4 fare became £4.30 or £4.40, and you grumbled about it, but it was just what happened. I think that might be where we're getting to with council tax.
Well, we shall see. I've asked the audience if they can what their thoughts are, so they can perhaps share what their thoughts are about whether councils will always tend to go for the 4.99. I mean, there are obviously councils around the country that don't. I guess it's how do you draw that? How do you navigate that dividing line between never increasing them, because obviously people, cost of living, etc. People increasing tax is not something that anyone would want to do, I guess. Versus the always increasing them, where you just kind of expect it every year. That's just a compounded increase year after year after year. But I guess we'll have a more informed answer about that when we welcome the leader of Portsmouth City Council, Councillor Steve Pitt, onto the show, hopefully in a couple of weeks' time. So,
absolutely.
So we shall see. So yeah, tax recommendations. Talking of whom, so what did come up in the conversation was actually the impact of the local government reorganisation and the devolution settlements that's kind of hanging in the air at the moment. That lots of things are up in the air. I've got a couple of clips of Steve Pitt's words on that. So the leader of Portsmouth City Council. Should we have a listen to them?
Yeah, let's have a little look.
And I would encourage our other group leaders to have similar thoughts and make sure that we are being very, very clear that it is hands off Portsmouth until you, one, tell us what you plan to do with the poor old Isle of Wight, who are just left floundering in the Solent without the ability to know where they now are expected to sit. Two, be absolutely clear with us about what it means when you say your preference is to roll whole districts and boroughs together that were arbitrarily, in many cases, drawn on maps 50 years ago, and you want to repeat that mistake all over again. And then three, show us your money.
Follow or subscribe for more.
But we do absolutely definitely have a Labour government that don't listen, because there was a cross-party white paper prepared by the LGA before the general election, regardless of who was going to win it. That was their document for the new government, and they've ignored it. We had Angela Rayner, so they don't listen. We had Angela Rayner talking to council leaders across the country straight after the general election, saying that she was going to forge a new relationship with local government. Well, isn't she just? So her new relationship with local government is to abolish most of it and start all over again with something else that she thinks is easier to deal with, because the Labour government would rather talk to a small group of people in a room and think that's a good way to find out what's actually happening in communities up and down the country, rather than continue to work alongside local government to make improvements, which we know is mainly about money. Our second point I'd like to make is they clearly don't care, because if they did, they wouldn't have lumped £1.4 billion of additional cost on charities and third sector organisations who are going to have to bear that cost and pass it on to others through the budget process. And they're clearly not competent, because they couldn't even work out that if you just taxed the winter fuel allowance, you would save nearly as much money as they're going to end up saving by having put hundreds of thousands of pensioners through hell over the course of the winter. And we know that the energy payment compensation that we put in place has at least done something to smooth that out for now in excess of over 1,000 low-income pensioner households. So they don't listen, they don't care, and they're not competent. Those of you who've been around a while might recognise why I'm referring to those three things.
Follow or subscribe for more.
So,
Well,
yes.
good to see Steve on the fence as always, and
Yes,
taking a conciliatory tone.
yeah. I really wish you would make it clear what his actual views are.
Yeah, and to be fair to Steve, I think he makes some really kind of excellent points in there. We won't delve too deep, but there is something in this whole plan that feels rushed, that just there's an indecent haste about it without the classic show me the plan. You've unveiled the end point of and devolution. Doesn't it sound wonderful and empowering? And we're going to move the decision making to where the people are. Well, okay, but as part of a unitary authority, we get given a pot of money, most of which we have to spend on things that we are forced to spend it on, whether we want to or not, with no ability to control that spend. And there's a small handful of beans left, where I'm sure when we get to full cabinet, each party will step forward with their own 2 minutes in the spotlight, calling on the administration to put aside £30,000 for X and £70,000 for Y and support the whatevers, and everyone will get their leaflet fodder. But then the money's all spent. There was never enough of it. I'm still not sure I understand the what is going to make this. What's in it for us, Simon? What's in it for us?
Well, to me, it's a solution in search of a problem. There is a problem in local and regional government in that they can be inefficient, and that their representation isn't evenly distributed, and you could argue that lots of votes, for example, are wasted and ignored, and that's actually about the voting mechanism. Talking about proportional representation, but I'll put that one to a side before I take us off on a tangent. But
have you got a bar graph for that?
I'm sure I've got a bar chart somewhere. I keep a load of them hidden away in case I ever need a bar chart. I think there's an argument to be made about something needs to change to improve local democracy, to make it more agile, and to give it more powers to be able to do the things it needs to do to serve people. And the example that the government have gone with is that areas with regional mayors seem to be doing very, very well. Whether that's the right solution for all areas is something I'd almost kind of question whether it's we've arrived. This is the solution we've got, but we haven't yet defined what the problem is that it's solving. And we haven't yet defined how we're getting from where we are to where we want to be. And we haven't yet defined where the money's going to come from to do that, or where the savings will be in order to enable that, or the savings, where the savings are that will be the massive benefit of actually doing all of this massive piece of work. And we haven't yet decided where all of those borders are going to be that are going to be really important about how we decide the sizes of the new unitary authorities, which need to be at least 500,000, isn't it? It's 500,000 people. So to me, that's a lot of questions, and I don't know any organisation that would leap into any type of change program with all of those variables unwritten. I don't know that anyone would want to do that. And maybe that's why there isn't actually a choice.
Well, and I think there's also an inherent risk, isn't there? That I guess when we look at it through the lens of private business,
Mm-hmm.
that the private business and some areas of private business get quite good at this. You know, they the big fish eats the slightly smaller fish. It because of its economy of scale,
Yes.
it absorbs the smaller fish. Then the smaller fish is absorbed into the bigger bit. But the part about that is that it is the bigger fish that calls the tune. And the bigger fish is ruthless in its nature when absorbing the little fish. So, people make noises about, the back office savings, or, or well, you rather than having just lots of different finance departments, you just got one and HR is consolidated. And all of those things are, will save you money. When you sack the people who are doing the jobs at the moment.
Yes.
And that's where your savings come from. And, we'll use things like right sizing the organization, and there will be some adjustments in headcount. But that is usually in the private sector is a pretty cold, hard, bloodletting affair that is ruthless and very painful for the organization that's being absorbed. Now, what I don't see in this plan is who the big fish is, who is going to be the person that's driving that agenda, and to what target operating model. And I know this is getting a bit nerdy and kind of, but for me, if and let's speculate, Portsmouth absorbs Havant, Fareham, and Gosport, and I know Gosport are very keen not to be absorbed by anybody. They want to create the Gosport People's Free State, which is obviously something we can come on to on another show. But ultimately, who are the person or persons that's going to look at that whole structure and say, right, and I'm going to throw speculative stuff out there, Simon, like,
Oh, okay, go for it.
Gosport will no longer have a town hall. We'll get rid of that. Everybody who works for Gosport, that entire office building is gone. We will have a small remote office in the high street for any in-person. And everybody who works in that building will now have to work in, their roles will all be absorbed into the Greater Portsmouth Unitary Authority, which is going to be based in Lakeside. And so, your option is whatever roles are left, there are currently 15 of them across all 4 of the boroughs. There'll be 10 in the future. You can all apply for them, but you've got to come and work in Lakeside. And if you don't like it, stick it up your trumpet, you're gone. Now, I've created a very kind of egregious scenario there, but that's how it would work if it was in the private sector.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, there's all sorts of things about natural wastage, and which is as people were due to retire or due to leave anyway, you just don't replace them, etc., or you redistribute people across the organisation. But I think behind all of that, there's also our councils in a position to be able to make these sorts of changes in a way that will actually deliver the savings that the government is actually depending on. I don't know that they are, without paying very expensive consultancy fees to outsiders that will come in, observe things for 6 months, and then tell them basically all the bits they need to chop off. So, but at the end of the day, regardless of how you divide up the cities or what authorities you make, you still need the same number of people to sweep a road. You still need the same number of people to empty a bin. You
don't, do you?
Well, surely there's the same number of streets to be swept or bins to be emptied than before.
Well, no, because even if you look at bins, not all of those 4 authorities that we've spoken about follows the same drumbeat. You know, we in Portsmouth have our refuse bins emptied weekly, our recycling bins emptied fortnightly. We don't have glass recycled. We have food waste recycled. Now, I don't know the exact arrangements, but not all of those local, or not all 4 of those areas have those services.
No, but but they'll probably overall have less frequency or less preponderance of. Can't believe how nerdy we're getting about. Here we are talking rubbish. Sorry, audience.
But I think the key.
Yeah.
The key point is that if you're going to harmonise everything,
yeah,
then if they make you and I the rubbish czars, because the amount of rubbish that we talk,
okay.
and our arrangement is to find the most cost-effective solution, you know, then there's an element of, I would look at it and, you know, again, if I'm being utterly dispassionate, and I don't know whether this is true, but Fareham only has fortnightly bin collections. So across the whole of the Greater Portsmouth area, we will move to fortnightly bin collections. And I know that Portsmouth City Council have insourced waste collection, but actually looking at the contract with Biffa that Hampshire has, that's cheaper than the Portsmouth model. So we're going to outsource it all back to Biffa. You know, we won't need as many refuse collectors in Portsmouth, because rather than having a weekly collection, it's now a fortnightly collection. Big spreadsheet, 73.3 million saving across the arrangement. There you go. That's refuse sorted.
Well, we're making the assumption that the ideal would be moving to the least, basically to the lowest common denominator service model, and I can understand why that would be an attraction. But these are all really kind of minute points for us to that actually the councils are going to have to thrash out and kind of find ways to serve. Whether actually the idea would be to move them all to weekly and with food waste and with doorstep glass collection. I don't know whether any of the others have doorstep glass collection, but I know that's something that's planned to come into being in Portsmouth. So yeah, I mean, just as an example, I think rubbish is probably a really good example of how that works. But the office kind of perspectives, like lots of service roles in the last 10, 15 years, those of organizations have consistently been able to serve more and more service requests with fewer and fewer people, and by cross-training their staff to be able to deal with lots of different things, and to a degree being more flexible about where those people are located. You know, with council staff, some of those you need them to be physically in the areas they serve, because there is some need from residents to be able to go into a place and speak to a person. But for lots of people, they don't. They can self-serve online, or they can ring someone, and then therefore that person can be served by someone that isn't in a big office, but could be in a small retail space that's in a high street. So it's somewhere where people can go. I don't know. We're kind of basically just throwing stuff out, aren't we?
We are throwing stuff out there, but I think the interest, the piece for me, and the reason why I kind of go down these routes, Simon, is let's look at the baseline. Portsmouth balanced budget, Treasury mid-year review, smiley face. Southampton, 175 million in the hole. Hampshire, 195 million in the hole. So don't know about the Isle of Wight. But let's presume that the Isle of Wight is, as Steve suggested, still bobbing about in the
well, it hasn't gone anywhere.
Not belonging to anybody.
No.
So if we presume
Donald Trump hasn't claimed it or something, so
not yet, but that could happen. So those three get together.
Yeah.
their baseline to get to zero is between them. They've got to save £370 million. Or the benevolent and lovely Angela Rayner is going to write off their £370 million and let them start from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important question. I mean, that's going to be a really big. I mean, I don't know that Steve will have the answer yet, but that's a really important question. I think that's what he meant by when he was saying, show us the money, because either the councils that aren't in the situation that Hampshire County Council or that Southampton City Council are in are going to end up effectively subsidising and taking on the debt burden of the councils that have financial problems, or central government is going to have to wipe that money out, which is still a bit more of a punishment to the councils that manage their stuff well, but is perhaps better than the alternative. But I mean, also, where does that money come from? Because it doesn't grow on trees, as someone famously said. Watch this space, I guess. So we don't know. So. But in regard to the council meeting, that was the cabinet meeting. So, I mean, Steve said himself a couple of times, I'm not going to kind of rehearse here again what I'll be saying in a couple of weeks' time. So we'll be eagle-eyed and watching what's actually happening on the budget meeting on the 25th. So aside from the normal budgetary pressures and the normal tit for tat that goes on about, well, we'll vote for it if you do this for for these residents in this area, and we'll vote for it. We'll vote for this if you do this for our residents in this area. There's also the thing hanging over it of, well, what's going to happen in the next couple of years?
Much more to come, and luckily there's an informative, non-bitey, non-gougy podcast that you can follow to find all that information.
Yeah. What's it called again?
The Pompey Politics Podcast.
Yes, so please do follow on Facebook or Blue Sky or Threads or X or subscribe on YouTube, or if you'd like to sign up for a newsletter, you can sign up for that on our website, which is pppodcast.uk. Please do that. So what else has gone on this week? Let's kind of zoom. We've zoomed right into Portsmouth Guildhall.
Yes.
Let's kind of zoom out. What have been the other things that have happened this week? I've got a list. Do you want me to reel, or do you want to reel off your kind of big ones?
Well, should we pick the it's madness every minute from across the pond?
Yes.
And shall we talk about Mr. Trump and Gaza by the sea?
Well, yeah. I mean, we can talk about. Well, he said a thing that seems to have been rode back quite interestingly, or the details are really, really kind of sketchy. Either the US are buying it or they're taking it, and everyone else is basically just going to have to leave, supposedly, whether they want to or not. Because that's not a thing that's gone badly in the history of humanity at all in previous examples. Just so that by the sounds of it, he can build a load of high value seafront property. I think that's kind of the gist of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was under the auspices of there's never going to be peace between the Gazans and the Israelis. So, rather than us try and come to any kind of settlement, we'll just empty Gaza and develop it as a holiday resort. So I guess, and we're taking a light-hearted view to this because I think you have to, because there is so much fired out so often coming from the US and from the table of Trump. I think somebody on the politics show this morning said it's almost like a Jackson Pollock painting. He just throws everything at the canvas over and over again, and you haven't really got much of a clue as to what's going on. So, there is this whole, and it's not unknown, is it? You remember the North Korea thing back in his first term, Little Rocket Man. You just think so much of what he says is incendiary. And you do wonder whether it's that kind of old thing of, if you say something so outlandish that when you row back to it for something which probably is a bit more sensible, it looks so much more sensible compared to the madness that you threw on the table first time round.
So, having not read The Art of the Deal, it seems like his negotiating tactic is a lot of the time say random shit so they think you're batshit crazy and don't know what to expect from you, and therefore don't know what you just don't know what you're going to do next, and no one can kind of keep up with all of the things that you're saying because it's just impossible to kind of like come back to them. I don't know. It's a very different way to approach international politics and international diplomacy. But we shall see. I mean, the American pronouncements of the defense secretary basically saying that, you know, Ukraine is being unrealistic to expect to return to its 2014 borders, and that defending Europe is no longer the number one priority of the United States. I mean, that's a scary wake up call. You could use other words.
Well, and there's a couple of interesting dynamics to that, isn't there? The first is that wars almost never end on the battlefield. They end in a negotiated settlement. And I guess if you go back to 2014, that's when Russia first annexed Crimea. So they did that 10 years ago. Now, you can't see I can't see any negotiated settlement which would mean that Ukraine would get Crimea back. You know, that just would not. I can't see a way where that could possibly happen. So that for me wasn't the maddest thing that's ever been said.
No, but it seems an odd place to start your negotiation, doesn't it?
Well, and I'm not convinced that there's an element of kind of how much the Americans, you know, are looking to get a fully negotiated settlement. I think there's an element of, you know, all sorts of kind of mad stuff that can go on, and you know, even to the point of view where the first negotiated part of the settlement next week is the Americans and Russia are going to get together in Riyadh and have a natter before involving the Ukrainians.
Yeah, which is alarming and disturbing, because at the end of the day, this has to involve the Ukrainians. I can see there's kind of like a steady scramble of different countries to say, "Oh, we must be involved. We must be involved. We must be involved." Well, hang on a minute. Let's involve the people whose bloody country this is, whose country has been invaded. Let's you know, they need to be the ones making a decision, as difficult, as terrible, or as awful as that needs to be. But that needs to be a decision involving them, because again, in geopolitical history, all of the times where enforced boundary changes have been made by basically Western countries carving up other countries in order to, quote unquote, have a little bit of peace, it's never resulted in peace.
No,
and it's never resulted in the thing that people want. But at the same time, I don't know what negotiate. I mean, Trump it seems to be all about his negotiating tactic, but I don't know what negotiating tactic he possibly has the power or the ability to leverage over someone like Putin, who quite clearly just wants to take as much land as he wants. And if someone doesn't stop him, then he'll keep doing it.
Yeah, I guess and again, without wishing to get into it too deeply, because I think we'd need, there is a piece where, you know, this war was supposed to be done in months. And, you know, Putin, I believe at the start of it, genuinely believed he was just going to sweep through.
Yeah.
And almost unopposed.
And that never happened. But Trump was also meant to fix this within a day of coming into office.
Yeah. And that's, again, is one of those kind of, well, if you just shout enough. I guess 3 years on, there's still, you know, I don't think, you know, there's a thing, you know, if you look at the tens of thousands of Russians that have died in Ukraine, there is an element for Putin of, you know, you're not going to win this, you know. So there is an element of you know, leaving his kind of megalomania aside, there's got to be a way out of this rather than just sending another 10,000 conscripts to the front line to die. So, let's keep our fingers crossed that within the madness somewhere, common ground is found. So,
hopefully so. I mean, Penny Mordaunt, previous MP for Portsmouth North, said on Radio 4 this week that there's an immorality in not providing Ukraine enough resources to win. I'm paraphrasing her massively here. Not providing them with enough resources to win the war, but just enough to keep it going. Because and that's immoral in itself, because that just prolongs the suffering. But at the same time, she also reflected that not introducing there being a material cost for Putin will not discourage him from doing it again, or doing it elsewhere, or doing further. And if you look on the other side of the planet, that's not really giving any discouragement to other countries that might want to be eyeing up islands that are nearby them that they consider to be part of their country.
Yeah. So that's a touch on.
So that's
Trump.
A bit of international flavour. Let's
exactly. What
should
else you got on your list?
So the whole WhatsApp farrago.
Which you heard it here, perhaps not first, but at least second, back in November. The WhatsApp group run by local Labour. Some pretty unpleasant and childish nastiness in there. Broke in the Sun on Thursday with a few extra revelations in there. A meme about Richie Sunak being led away to Rwanda. A couple of comments which were definitely anti-Israel and possibly were on the anti-Semitic fringe. But not a lot new came out. But the new angle taken was that the group was overseen or owned by Stephen Morgan and Amanda Martin, and these two Labour MPs. They must resign because they've sat idly by and let this happen. And anyone who's listened to the podcasts knows that my politics are not aligned with Stephen and Amanda. But if Stephen Morgan MP was monitoring the WhatsApp group rather than doing his job as an MP, well, frankly, he should be sacked for that. To suggest that, those people were overseeing or actively monitoring that group, just a nonsense, isn't it, Simon? Really?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's. I mean, obviously, the things that were shared were disgraceful and weren't and they certainly don't inhibit the values that the Labour Party holds dear. It's difficult to talk about this without kind of descending into a bit of whataboutery. I think that there are political groups up and down the country who are nervously looking through their WhatsApp lists and nervously looking through who's in their WhatsApp groups and what things have been said, and discovering that the auto disappearing of messages is really poor in WhatsApp. It's either apparently, a day, a week, or 90 days or something crazy. So it's like really useless. You'd want like a month or something. Let's be honest. In most other situations, the admin takes on some sort of moderating role to make sure people aren't kind of going off piste a bit and to keep the conversation relevant. But in this situation, don't they both have better things to be doing? And I would have expected them to have been doing those things. But I think that any political group of campaigners that is under the impression that what they discuss in their WhatsApp group is private is kidding themselves. And I'm sure no one is perfect, but they should maybe take the approach that they shouldn't say anything in a WhatsApp group that they wouldn't be willing to say with a microphone in their hand in front of a hall full of their electorate.
Well, and you're absolutely spot on. And I think we do have to look back as to why this exploded. And it exploded locally, didn't it? Because there was rather a lecturing motion brought in front of full council from the Labour group about online being rude to people and can't we just all be kind? You know, and that was aimed very clearly at one particular councillor. And you know, it drew the, you know, a lot
Do
of
the you
other
first, mate.
parties. Well, and a councillor was on one of the forums this week saying, what upset me more than anything else was I got 100% behind this Labour motion of be kind, be nice. There's no place for this in politics, only to find that he had been rather unpleasantly verbally abused in their WhatsApp group. And, you know, he was quite open that, you know, he felt he had been taken for a mug. But by the group. But in terms of culpability for our MPs, oh, shush.
Yeah,
What a
when
load of old nonsense.
they've not said any of these things themselves.
No,
You know, and there's no evidence that they've even seen the. I'll be funny about you, but I'm in tons and tons of WhatsApp groups, and most of them are muted because it's just endless drivel that you don't kind of really want or need to look at. I'm sure they've got better things to be doing.
And when you tap your screen and see that there are 43 unread messages,
you don't really.
You open it and close it to make those go away, that you don't bother reading them. So.
Yes. So in short, if you don't want shitty things to be found in your WhatsApp group, don't post shitty things. It's really that simple.
Exactly that.
Yes. So what have we got? What have we got after today? So we've got some stuff coming up. So 2nd of March, we'll be doing our post-budget action report. So we'll see how that meeting goes and what actually comes out of that kind of fight for where the money's going in the next year in Portsmouth. On the 9th of March, we're welcoming Portsmouth City Council leader Steve Pitt back onto the show to talk about local government reorganisation and devolution, and maybe there'll be some things that are more certain than the nailing fog to the wall that seems to be the situation at the moment. And I think we're still kind of penciling the March 16th for a debate on assisted dying. So we're also trying to reach out to other local authorities and other councillors to see if we can hear from the councillors that are in Havant, Gosport, Fareham, Isle of Wight, and see kind of, and in Hampshire County Council, and see kind of what they've got to say with all of this, because we might all be getting really chummy in sometime soon. So we should probably
could be. And I think, as always, you know, we've made it clear we do requests. So if there's any topic you think we should be covering and we aren't, then mail in to studio@pppodcast.uk and we will pick that up. And we're always good to go for these things. So you've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sainsbury. Thank you very much for your time. Please do remember to like, follow, subscribe so you can get more of our shows. And by all means, sign up to our weekly email newsletter so you can hear what's going on, and send us your thoughts and ideas. See you next time. Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.